Thank you.
No problem. So let's start by creating an empty repository for our project. So we'll go to our GitHub, our repositories, new. We'll call this, let's call it the winter break app. And we'll keep it public. We're going to initialize this with a README because we're not going to have that README otherwise, because we're not going to use create React app. I always like to add the MIT license, because if somebody goes into your repository and uses your code and you don't have this license and it like breaks something major in their system, they actually can kind of sue you for it. But with the MIT license, it covers you. Let's see here. I don't believe I need to get ignore yet, so let's create the repository. So if you look, this just has a license and a README file that says Winter Break App. That's all that has. Let's see here. So our next move is we're going to clone this. I'm going to clone it right into our terminal.
So you clone the empty repo?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And
I'll show you why. We'll let it clone in. Now we're going to CD into that. Now I'm going to run ls-a. You see how it popped up with the master branch? We cloned the empty repo because it gives us this Git tracking. This allows us our version control, our creating branches, all that stuff. That's why you create the repository and clone it down empty. This is where all that comes from.
Nice.
So yeah, you can see when I seed into it, I got the master branch right away.
See, that's what I want to do, is create my own app so I can start doing the more modern Git flow by creating branches by features, because Bernie said that's the direction that Lend is going into, because that's
what they're saying they do it. What you do is you create the branch, you build out the feature, and when it's done and it gets merged into master, you actually erase the branch.
Really?
Yeah, and it keeps GitHub clean.
Yeah, I've tried doing that before. It's kind of a little difficult for me because like sometimes features dig into other features or like other components.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it on this build week. It's the first time I've actually done it without a name branch. But like I built out, I created a branch for login, and I basically just built out the login component real quick. Sent up a pull request. It got merged to master. I erased the login branch. Then I made another one for private route. And then right now I made one for Redux and Reducer. So as I built out Redux and all the reducers, I got that done. Once it got merged into master, I was just erasing the branches. I got to constantly remember that branch doesn't exist when I go to start coding again. Because you know how it defaults to the last branch you were working on?
Oh,
which is normally your name branch. You'll start writing and realize, oh, that branch doesn't exist anymore. I got to make another one.
Nice. I've not thought about that. That's cool.
Like I was always classic for the working branch when I was doing like projects like this. You had the working branch and then you had the master branch. So we'll create a working branch. And the command here is if we have an empty repository locally now with nothing in it. So we're going to run a program called npm init-y. And what init does is it initializes it with a package.json file. And the -y means that's just there because it's going to ask you like 15 questions going through this, and you're going to want to answer yes to all of them. So if you just put the -y in there, it just does it for you.
What is a JSON file?
A JSON file is it's a universal like multi-browser, multi-language communication they came up with. That's an object with key and value pairs, but it's all done in string form. So you can use that JSON file. You can parse it and integrate it into like Python, C++, Java, JavaScript, PHP, pretty much any language that you want. It makes it universal because they all accept strings.
Mm-hmm.
So they made it very strict. It's got to be double quotes, and it's got to be an object with key value pairs, and it comes in as a JSON object.
Gotcha.
And then you can parse it to whatever language you're using. So it makes it easy for APIs to communicate. That's why they'll send data out as a JSON object, like on a GET request. So if you're using like WordPress, which uses PHP backend stuff, it'll go in there. If you're using a Java backend, it'll go in there. If you're using like a Django with Python, you can use that data as well. So it makes it universal. So you ain't got to write different backends to talk to different languages and different apps.
Nice. Thank you.
All right. So now if we do an ls -a in our repository, now you see we have a package JSON. So let's go in here and let's open this up. Let's see what we got. Let me close this one. I'm gonna take this one, spin it over. We'll keep this going. And now if you look, we have package JSON. And inside here, we got the name, the version, the main, which is where our main file is going to live. It's got scripts in here. It's got the repository type and where it's at. Just some other basic things in here. So I always gotta go back and look a little bit at the last one I made. All right, so we have package JSON. So let's open up a terminal because we're gonna have to add a few things. So we're in here on our working branch. Well, we know we're going to have to, if you notice too, even though I ran npm init, you'll notice there's no yarn lock or package lock JSON file here because npm init does not create those. So you can run npm init and then still use yarn. Or you can run npm init and still use npm, but only for that init phase because all that does is create this package JSON default for you.
Gotcha.
So now I can literally go to yarn, add React. And boom, you see our dependency list is populated with the latest version of React. Now we need more. We need one called React DOM, which I think is DOM all capitalized. No, it's dash DOM. All right, dash DOM. Oh, I pushed equal. That wasn't good. Yarn add React dash DOM. Yeah, see, if you look now, we have our yarn lock file because we started adding dependencies. Let's see here. We're gonna need you're gonna need individual scripts too for React. So we're gonna yarn. This is what allows you to do your yarn start, your yarn build, your yarn test, the actual scripts. You see how this one says script test? Well, the React has their own. That's React scripts. I believe it's scripts. Yeah, scripts. So this comes in and this creates the scripts that we would use for starting our app and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
So basically, we're just adding dependencies onto a raw file is all we're doing. Once that gets done, this one takes a little bit. The scripts is a little large.
Okay, I'll pour my coffee while that's happening.
I believe after this gets done, we have the basics to start a React app. We can start building our file structure.
Okay. Yeah, so normally for a build week project, it's the back end or either the back end or your project lead who does this setup?
No, it's actually, this build week was the React 2 developer's job to create the React app, which most of them just do, like run the create React app package and then push it up. But then you got to go in and erase all the boilerplate. So we have 5,000 GitHub changes because of the node modules folder. And the reason why it's showing that, did you notice that something's missing here?
What is missing?
I should have initialized it in the repository, but I didn't. And I didn't do it on purpose because there's a very important file I'm working with GitHub called gitignore. All right, and what gitignore does is it literally ignores files so they don't get sent to GitHub. because like right now, if I did a git push, if you see up here, you see how I have 5,000 pending changes?
Yeah.
That's because it's seeing all of my node modules for this project from when React got installed and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you went and just git push the node modules here, your git push would literally probably take about an hour.
Okay.
And node modules are universal because of this package.json. That's why when you bring a project in from GitHub that you haven't worked on previously,
Mm-hmm.
there's no node modules folder when you clone that down, like one of the Lambda projects, and you have to run that yarn or npm install.
Mm-hmm.
What that yarn or npm install does is it creates this node modules folder, goes through this and installs this out of that node modules folder. But that folder is so big, you don't want that living on GitHub, especially when it's universal across all package managers.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to kind of keep that local. Save bandwidth, save space, the full 9 yards.
Okay.
So we are going to right now, we are going to create a new file called .git ignore. And that's all it is. It's a git ignore file. Now we have a git ignore file, and this just takes a series of files. Like the one file we know we want to ignore for sure is node underscore modules. All right, node modules, we want to ignore that one. Anything with our VS Code, which this will be automatically done for you if you just, when you create this repository,
Mm-hmm.
when you initialize the README, just initialize git ignore. That's the easiest way to do it. I did it the hard way just to kind of show you guys what's actually in here, so you understand how it works.
Right. Thank you.
So we're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore a command called build, which is when you like when you build a React app for production, it runs a file called build, but that's normally tied directly into your API that you're pushing to, like Heroku or Zeit or Netlify. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason for that to be on GitHub. So you don't want GitHub to have the build file either. Well, I'm just going through the list here of different ones. Let's see here. Anything npm / let's see here. .idea. I'm not even sure what that file is, but I want to make sure it's not there. I think that's for the package. DS store. Actually, let me go into another project. I think this might be because of the library. And a lot of these, I'll try and explain what they do as I go through them. Yeah, this one's nice. It's all commented for you. All right, yeah, this one's done a little differently, and I misspelled modules. That wouldn't have worked out well. Okay, so I like the way they got this the default package JSON commented, so I'm gonna do that so you guys can see it. These are the dependencies. The dependencies that we don't want in there are node modules. There's one called /.pnp and .pnp.js. This is what comes with React app raw too.
Mm-hmm.
So PNP is probably got something to do with you ever seen that public where they want the manifest and everything in the HTML file when you bring in a create React app? It probably ignores that so it doesn't get pushed up. I believe that's what those are for.
Gotcha.
And then they have one here labeled testing. You know what, it'd probably be easier if I just did this. Let's delete this. And anything that you label a git ignore file,
Mm-hmm.
it does exactly that. Git ignores it. If it sees a git ignore when you're running your git commands, it'll literally just walk right over it. It won't even look at it. So this is what comes with the default Create React app. You got your node modules folder. You don't want that going. PMP, they got a testing for /coverage. Not even sure what that's for. The build is not there. And then they have miscellaneous ones like DS store, env files, which you'll learn about in the back end. Those are env for tests and production and stuff. Any of your yarn errors and debugs. And these I actually added in here. And can anybody guess why I added those?
Which ones did you add?
These two are right at the bottom.
No.
This is actually right out of my build week project. Everybody remember what happens when one of your teammates uses yarn and the other one uses npm?
Oh yeah.
If you add the yarn.lock and the package lock.json to the git ignore, you can use them. Any team member can use whatever package manager they want. Because at that point, these files are not getting pushed up. So everything that's sitting on GitHub is raw. It's not tied to any package manager at all.
Nice.
So that way you don't have to worry about that problem. So this is pretty much it. You got your normal debuggers and stuff and all that's in there, but we know we didn't want that in. So now we should be able to, with all this and we save it. Let's save it. All right. Now we should be able to do a add commit. Let's see what it adds. All right, so the only thing it changed was package JSON. It did not add anything else. All right, so if we got to create it a git ignore, VS Code settings JSON package.json. So let's push it up there and see what shows up. We know we did it right if this, okay, it didn't take several hours, so we know we did it right. So now if you look at the branch, you notice the git ignore file is there. We have the README and the package JSON, but you notice everything else is missing. This VS Code wasn't supposed to go. I missed that one. I missed that one. So VS Code was not supposed to go, but that's all right. It's not a big file. We got our git ignore file, which just shows us what's in there, but we did not get our node modules. We didn't get the yarn error. We didn't get yarn lock. We didn't get any of that stuff that's related to that. We got our package JSON, our README, and our license. That's all we needed. So we have that, and as you add dependencies, it'll start adding itself into that git ignore file if it sees it there. But let's create the rest of our file structure. We know that we need a couple of folders here. One of these folders is going to be called a public folder. And then we're going to have another folder called a source folder, SRC, which that was not supposed to happen that way. Let me delete that. Yeah, go away. All right, so we need a new folder. Oh, that was file, that's why. New folder called source. Okay, in our public folder, we'll start there. Public folder, truthfully, the only thing that has to be in here, even though you see all that bloating when you do create React app, the only thing that needs to be in here is index.html. So now we have a raw HTML file. So we're going to build out our HTML file because we know what we're going to need. As this thing's thinking, and I don't know why. All right, we're going to start with the doc type. That's the way it all starts. Then our next tag. This is going back to the very first unit that we did. HTML. Inside the HTML tag, we're going to set the language to equal English. That way, if anybody's got a keyboard or something and they're using it, it knows what it's working with. And then there's two things that go inside the HTML tag, if you remember. We have one that's called the head. Oh, not the heck, the head. You'd be surprised how much changing a chair completely changes the way you type. I got a new office chair for Christmas, and it's, yeah. I messed up the E and A. Okay, so we have the head, and then we also have the body. So we have head, and in the head, that's where our meta tags go. Like, we'll have a meta tag that's our set, and character set of UTF-8. I'll have another meta that's, oh, this is the name, this viewport. This is the one for the responsiveness. Viewport, and the content is going to be width equals device dash width. And we need an initial scale. Initial scale is going to be equal to 1. So that gives us our two main meta tags. That's all we really need, truthfully, to start this out. The only other thing that the page is lacking, everybody can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, only the other thing we need is a title.
I feel like it's been such a long time since I've done this, but the viewport, that's not where we're setting our REM scale, correct?
No, that's not where you're setting your REM scale. What the viewport is doing is that's telling the browser when they open this page that the width of the page is equal to the device width.
Gotcha.
So whatever the device width is equals the size of the web page. So rather than like if you didn't have this, you would open like a page on your cell phone and it would show you just this upper little corner of the web page. And you literally have to use the scroll bars to move around because it would be set at whatever width it was programmed to rather than the device width.
Gotcha.
And this is the Winter Break app. So, and the last thing we added was the title. Now, the only other thing that we need, because we're creating a React app, well, two other things. We want to put this in the body. We want to put something in called NoScript. And what NoScript is going to basically say is you need JavaScript to run. All right, that's basically what the browser is going to check to see if somebody's got their JavaScript settings turned off in their browser, like not to accept it. And it's just going to display this message because React is 100% JavaScript. So without it, none of it works. Another thing we're going to have is the good old div. And inside this div, we're not even going to put any content. We're just going to give it an ID that's going to be equal to root. This is where our app's going to mount. So, and this is the beauty of React and how it works. Let's say you have a fully built HTML page and you like the way it looks, you like the way everything operates, but you want to include like React into a portion of that page. You can do that just by giving it a div with an ID of wherever you want to mount the React portion of it to the HTML.
Nice.
So a lot of people don't know that. They think it's just got to be all React or none. No, you can mix these up. You can have like all your navigation and all that stuff done with that. And let's say you just wanted a React app that's just going to constantly render changing cards depending on API data. You can have that set into its own little div living inside the HTML page.
Nice.
All right, so we have that. That's pretty much all you need for the public file. That's all the public's going to see. Now we have the source. Source, what lives in source, we know we need our first file is going to be app.js. Oh, why did it do that? You meanie. I messed that up, didn't I? Okay, now it's making me mad. Just go away.
Yeah, that happens to me. If you delete it, it just fixes it by itself.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna make a new folder. Where'd my new folder go?
So the app JS is always on essentially the root, the source, and then your components, the rest of your components are in the components folder.
Huh? Yeah. As soon as I figure out why this won't let me add a folder now. It's being mean. All right, let's go here. I'm the school. All right. Now it's there. All right, so inside this source folder, I don't know why it won't let me add a new one. New folder. Okay, now it does it. All right, so in here we need a new file, and I started this off a little wrong because the file that they want to see first, the first thing that React sees when it tries to run this is actually one called index.js. This is where it looks first.
That's what I would love to do, is have a mental model of when we're talking about state management and data flow, what files the data hits in what order.
Yeah, well, what I've learned with the web browsers is everything defaults to index. Even on the server side, like you can embed like several index files. And this, as long as where it's looking, it's always, if you don't tell it where to go, it's going to go for an index. Kind of like in public here. In the public folder, it has an index.html. So when your web browser opens up, it looks for the index file. And then when your JavaScript runs, if it doesn't have a path specifically told to it in the browser, it looks for the JavaScript index file. And that's where it goes, just by default. That's why you'll see index labeled everywhere. That's just where it's going to live.
Gotcha.
So index, we need a couple things from index. We're going to, first thing we're going to do is, oh, my import's not working either. Okay. We're going to import React, capital React, from React. All right, so we're bringing in React for the first time. And then we have another one. This one you normally don't have to call because it's normally always there for you, but it's called React DOM. DOM is all caps. And this is going to come from React DOM. What those two do is, React is obviously React that gives you access to all the React stuff, the render and everything. React DOM is what allows it to mount the React app to the HTML file. That's its sole purpose in life. So like to make this, work, we're literally just going to call React DOM.
Oh, you mean like the DOM manipulation?
Yep.
So we have
React
to learn
DOM.render.
Learn a week
What's
that
that?
to do one line of code.
I'm sorry, what was that, Hector?
No, I'm saying like we spent a week learning that to like learn how to write one line of code for React.
Yeah, this is what controls all the DOM. Like React DOM.render. All right, we know that we're going to need a new file. What are we going to render in here? Index.js, all it does is render. So we're going to have to import, which we haven't made yet, an app file. And we're going to take that from, we'll call it, let's see, we'll be in source. So we'll go / app.js when we make it. So that's what we're going to be building. So we have to render app. Render app, and then we call it beside it. The second argument is document.get. I'm sorry, document.get element by ID. Did I spell that right? My autofill's not working, so it's irritating me. I got to type it out manually. And we're going to go get that ID we made, the root. So if you look like in index.html here, we created a div with the ID of root. So in our JavaScript, we're using React DOM. We're going to mount app inside of that document or wherever we're going to tell it to mount. And we're going to go get it with that. So that's going to put basically app inside of that div. That's what that's doing. So right now we are pretty much 100% raw. So the next thing we need to make is a new file. And this is going to be app.js. We're going to import React from React. And that's all we need here to start. And then we're going to write a function. We're going to call that function app. We're going to return. We're going to return just we'll return a div. And the div will have an h1 that says app is running. And then we're going to export that.
And this is where you put a function app, or if we wanted to do it in the format of export default app, you would delete function and turn it into a fat arrow function, correct?
No, you don't have to do that at all. If you wanted to not export default, like let's say you just wanted to bring it individually, just write export in front of this function.
Okay.
But the difference is the way you import it. If it's written this way, when you import it, you have to import it destructured.
Okay, that's right.
If it's exported by default, you don't have to destructure it up here.
Okay.
We can like ditch that. And that's pretty much it right there. So we have our app tied into our index. Our index is mounting it. That should work. Everything should work. Now let's check our scripts in package.json. We have our script. Now here, this is where I tell you, like, build your own boilerplate and save it on GitHub, because you see how much time we're already spending building this out manually as opposed to create React app. But you're getting the bare bones here. So we are missing some scripts, because right now, here, I'll show you why. Let me just get my reference back up. Like if I just go down here, we know everything's saved, right? We should be up and running, good to go. Let's run yarn start. I get an error. Start's not found. There is no start.
There's no yarn installed, right?
Oh no, we're installed.
Well, I thought when you yarn install, like you get to start, build, and all that stuff, the eject.
If it's in the package JSON, I mean, that's a good idea. We could try that, because I always put them in manually. This under the scripts tag. See where scripts here? This is where it's looking for start. Right now, all it sees is test. There would be one called start in here. That is, JSON's always double quote. And we'd have a start key. And what start would do would basically be run in React scripts start. Just like that. That's basically what that yarn command is going into scripts here, looking for that. And if it sees it, it's going to run whatever it tells it to. So now that I saved that, let's see if it works now. Then I want to try Hector's idea because that'd be kind of cool. Now we're going to run yarn start. Oh, we got React script start. What's happening? We're unable to detect the default browser. Would you like to add the default to package.json? Sure. Now I got my default browser in there. And it's starting, it's trying to do something. Let's see if it works. Failed to compile. App.js does not match the corresponding name on the disk. Oh, wait. Did I lowercase app.js somewhere?
Did we put the wrong path in the index?
Oh, yes, we did. App.js index should be in the same one. Let's try that. There it is. App is running. We're running a React app right now. Bare bones. No bloating, no nothing.
What did we change?
Oh, I had the path lowercase and it needed to be uppercase right here in index. I followed the error. It always tells you what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'm curious. I want to try that. What Hector was talking about, because that makes sense. That could probably work. Let's go into package. I'm just gonna. The window has crashed. Really? Mean spirited. All right. Let's go into, where was I? Package.json. All right. I'm gonna remove this, or I commented, I should say. And I'm going to open a terminal.
I think you have to take off the comma too.
Oh, yep. You're right.
Oh, what?
All right, so now let's try yarn install and see what picks up in here. $174. Oh, it don't like the comments in package.json. It don't like any of it. You can't have that. That's how strict package.json is. Oh, yeah, that command's not going to work in there either. Already up to date. Didn't give me anything. Bummer.
You would have done it manually then.
Yeah, you have to do it manually. Okay, but there's only a couple that you're going to need that really to use. You're going to have the start. You're going to have one called, actually, we already have it, this test file. That would actually just be React scripts. I can't even spell React today. Break's been too long, I guess. This would just be React scripts test. And then down here, we'd have another one called build. And can you guess what this is going to say?
React scripts build.
That's right. All right, what else do they have in there? They have the eject as well, which I've never had to use eject, but that's one of those things you can add as needed. So that's basically it. That's a bare bones React app.
Nice.
Oh, hold on one second, guys. So now that we've spent 45 minutes creating our own React app, what do you guys want to do?
Alrighty. Well, we decide the API because that'll decide what components we create, correct?
Yeah, and truthfully, I haven't found a good API that's open source for this unit that uses our login stuff and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what you guys want to do there.
Yeah,
I could run like the last sprint challenge uses everything. We can use that.
That works.
I could maybe fire up that server and we'll just build some stuff off of it. It's up to you guys.
that would be cool.
Okay. Let
Or
me
like if
find
it's
it.
possible to pull different stuff, just so it's not verbatim.
Yeah, I could probably pull let's see here. I could probably change the server to pull any kind of data we want. I could put in names or whatever.
Okay, that would be cool.
Let me I put it on a different branch just in case they still haven't created my sprint challenge. All right, playing around. So we're in here. We're in a server. So if I basically come in here, I'm on React Bubbles yarn start. Our server should start running and listening on port 5000. So if we go to localhost 5000, let's see if we get a message. Our app is working on localhost 5000, so our server's running from the sprint challenge.
Where did you put 5,000?
Right where it said 3000 up here.
Okay.
It basically localhost, and these are the ports available. So like normally our React apps run on 3000.
Okay.
But you did something in the, like you opened up another file, right? You opened up the project and changed something.
Yeah. I went over into our sprint challenge and started the server.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what you're referring to, right, Denise?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just that we can't see it because it's like on a different screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, here I could drag it over. I went into the React Bubbles project and ran a yarn start and fired up the server. That's what I did.
Gotcha. And then, okay, and the server was all ready. So you didn't change it from 3,000 to 5,000. This one just happened to be on 5,000.
Yeah, and basically what I did is I just put 5000 in my browser just to
Gotcha.
make sure that I was running and connecting and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. What does that
So
mean? 3,000 versus 5,000.
that's just the port on your computer, on your browser that it's running off of.
Okay.
I think it's just convention, right, to use those numbers.
Yeah, well, you'll see that that number change when you get into the back end. Like Luis will run it on like 3333, and then he'll put it on 4000, and then he'll put it on like 7000. It basically doesn't show you it doesn't matter.
Okay. Just wondering. Thank you.
The ports have specific numbers when they get to what they're trying to do. Like all servers that are launched, I believe, run on port 80, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then like they have incoming internetwork stuff that runs on like port 150. So they'll have specific port numbers that are like industry standards at that point.
Okay. So when you're creating the back end, that's where you're setting the port.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm so excited.
All right. So let me fire this app back up.
Stella, are you there?
I am here.
You're so quiet.
She's just quietly listening to our gibberish quietly.
I'm listening and I'm also working. I just wanted to feel a part of a team, guys.
Aw. We miss you, Stella.
I miss you too.
I Even though I'm not doing good Lord, a hackathon, I'm actually thinking about showing up just so I can work on my portfolio with another human in the room.
Yeah, relatable.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna have fun. I think we're having a hackathon meeting tonight.
Is it just a Zoom? How does that work?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
yeah. Basically, the way it was described to me real quickly is it's 30 hours to build an application with a team of 8 people max,
Oh,
and
cool.
you can't write a single line of code until the bell sounds. Then you got
Wow.
30 hours to complete it.
Wow.
They give you free food though. I got a DoorDash gift card, I think, somewhere.
awesome.
That's delicious.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
DoorDash. Bring you anything, right?
oh yeah. I use DoorDash or something.
Amazing.
All right, so we're done in package JSON for a little bit. Let's actually let me I'm gonna add a terminal here. We're gonna add something here to our package JSON that we know we're gonna need. The first thing we're gonna build is our login component. Let's build a login component to log into this server.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that what we have to use to talk back and forth to a server is a program called Axios.
Oh yes.
So let's go get that puppy.
And so how would you define an API? Because that was one of my behavioral questions. What is an API?
I can Google it and tell you. An API is what do they call that? It's
I know it's called
application.
program interface.
Yes.
So I can give you the name, but I'm not very good at explaining what it does.
Well, basically, it's what delivers content to an application. You have an application program. Ours is React. It has to interface in something. It has to be able to send and receive data that can be shared with other applications.
Just
So that's where the interface comes in, because it's an interface because it works with multiple applications across the broad spectrum. So like if our server, like let's say the server for React Bubbles was on Heroku,
mm-hmm.
we actually had a web address to that API. I can build an app, you can build an app, Hector can build an app, Stella can build an app, and all talk to that API, that interface.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, our applications are talking to that interface. So it's an application program interface. We write application programs, we interface with that. You kind of get that?
So the API it's just connecting you to the back end, right? So it's the interface between the applications and your back end.
Yeah. And the reason why it's an interface, the definition interface, is because it's not tied to just one application. It's not tied to just the one that you made. It's designed to work with from 2 to 10,000 applications.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I couldn't, like I could tell you, but I was missing the language to describe interface. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. Hopefully I did a good job. All right. So now this is something I like to do inside the source folder, is I always create a utils folder. I like to keep things a little organized to where like utilities will hold like I'll have it hold my Axios login, it'll hold my private route, it'll hold things that aren't components basically. So I normally put them in the utils folder. So inside this utils folder, we're going to make a new file. Now, I get short with this just for the simple fact that typing Axios with Authus takes too long. I call this API. It's API.js. All right, and API.js, this is going to be our login component. Or not our login component, but our Axios with Auth. This is what we're going to build in here. So first thing we're going to do is import Axios from Axios, because we know that's what we're going to be using. Now we're going to create a function truthfully, this is the only function that's going to live in this file. So we're just going to default to export it. So we'll just start calling this by a function, and the function's name is going to be API. And then we're going to export default API. So now we have the basis set for this. This is a very simple component. Can anybody guess what what this does? How does this work? How do you guys think this works?
What are you building there? The login?
I'm building the Axios with auth. I just call it API for short because it's easy.
You're gonna do the I'll have to look at the code. You're gonna do the. Man, I have this thing, man. Yeah, look at the code again.
But you're gonna have to type it a lot. Basically, I'll type the first line. We're gonna set up a variable inside our function called const token, because we're gonna need an authorization token to use our API. It's gonna want to see that in order to give us access to different endpoints inside of that API. So we're gonna set this equal to the local storage. This is where we use our local storage of the browser. And we're gonna get the item. Now these are pre-programmed into all browsers. This isn't part of like React, or it's not that proprietary. Local storage is something that can be used in just raw JavaScript, DOM manipulation, anything. What we're doing in here is we're telling it to get the item of token. So what this is going to do, first thing when this function runs, is it's going to go look in local storage for an item called token, grab that value, and set it to that token variable. That's all this is doing right now. Now we're going to do our return statement.
What does Axios create? Like, what is that doing?
That's I'll explain that actually right now. We're going to return something out of this function that's going to be an Axios call, but we're going to create. And what this does is it stores this stuff into the computer's memory and creates basically a header for Axios. It allows you to do a lot of things. It allows you to set like a base URL. It's more or less to help you with writing the code more than anything else. So like what we create in here is an object that we're going to send. And we're going to send this actually into Axios. And it's going to have a base URL and headers. And this is strictly for development purposes only. Because without this, let's say, let me just write a line down here. Let's say you were making an Axios call. Let's say Axios dot post. You wanted to post some data, okay? Well, without this Axios create as a dev tool, you would have to put the whole URL in each time you did this, http / localhost 5000, call it API / login. Like if we were just going to go ahead and log in without using this Axios create. In this separate package here, you would have to actually, rather than calling just your data that you were going to send in, you're going to have to send in a whole object. And in this whole object, you're going to have to label one as headers. And in the headers, you would have an object that basically had, I can't even spell headers. In headers, you would have an object that had an authorization. Basically what you would be typing out in the create. And you would have that equal to local storage get item token. And then outside of this headers object, you would have a body object called body. And this is where your body stuff would live, like like username. We'll call it Hector, and you'd have your password in here, and it would be foo. You would have to write this out every single time you did an authorization request to the API. You have to write this whole shoot match out. You'd have to send the header with the token item that you got back originally. You'd have to run all of this every time you type that in. So instead of doing this on every post that you made throughout all of your code, you write this API function that we're writing, which has a create, which creates what they call a base URL. Oh, that's all capitals. I don't like the fact that my autofill isn't working. And the base URL, what we'll put in there is our HTTP // localhost 5000. And basically that's the base URL. That's where this whole application is going to talk to one API. And this is where it lives. So we're setting a base URL like that. And then the other thing we're going to set is our headers, because that's not going to change. Our headers are going to have a, you can do content type. I think it's a good idea to do.
What is that referring to? Content type?
It basically tells the API the type of content you're sending. So if you were going to use like an XML format, you would send the content type as XML. But our content type almost always is going to be application/JSON. This tells it we're going to send an application/JSON object, which means it's going to see an object. Sometimes it'll be in JSON format, sometimes it won't. Like right now, this is not JSON format, because JSON format, everything has to be in double quotes. So this part allows you to kind of type loosely as you're doing things with objects that you're going to send to the API. You don't have to worry about having it strictly JSON formatted or running JSON parse or JSON stringify on everything. It basically makes it easier on us, just tells us the API is going to do that for us. And the other thing we're going to have is our authorization. Our authorization, this is where our token lives. And we're basically going to, this is going to be a template literal, because we're going to send in a $sign token. Now we don't have to do it this way. We could literally type this out in there and it will call it, but it actually no, because it's got to send it in the form of a string. So we do have to do it this way. We have to use this template literal, so that way the return token item gets sent to the API in the form of a string.
Oh yeah, because you set it to a variable. So
yeah. So basically, the Axios create allows us to, anytime now that we want to make a post request like we did here throughout our app, anytime we want to do this, instead of having all of this, first we have a base URL set across our whole app now. So now all I have to do is type in like API/login. That's where we're sending it. And instead of having all of this nonsense in here now, because we have that preset here. And we also have it set as an application type JSON. So now all we have to do is send in our object of whatever it's going to be, like username, vector, and password of foo. And I mixed up the quotes. I didn't put these in quotes because this part here takes care of that for us when it gets sent. So now anytime through our app, we're going to call it as API. dot post, and it'll be called as a function. So we import, instead of importing Axios, we're just going to import API, and we're going to call API like Axios, and just put in the shorthand stuff, because all the stuff that's redundant, you know, the whole dry method, don't repeat yourself. This Axios create is what allows us to keep all of our API calls dry. All those base URLs and stuff that we'd be typing out or copying and pasting constantly, we don't have to do that. They're in one spot, one location. No worries for typos, because you only wrote it once throughout the whole app.
Does it matter the export default API? Is it just standard that you have it at the end? The export API?
I always put it at the bottom. That's just,
Okay.
it makes me, I guess it's the way I read it. I think you can type it up here and it wouldn't matter,
Okay.
but it might matter in some browsers too, depending on the way it stacks the JavaScript. So I always type it in like as if I read it like a book. I created a function. I want that function to run. Then I'm going to export it out.
Gotcha.
You know, up here, it never made sense to me. Why am I going to export something that I haven't made yet? So I always put it at the bottom. But yeah, so there's our basis for it. So what this is going to do is it's going to get an item called token. Now, for this to work, we have to have a token. It won't work without it. So we have to have components now. We're going to make a new folder called components. Because we have to have a way to set this token if we don't have it. That's the whole point of having a login screen. So we're going to create a login file. Our login is going to import React from, because we're just going to build a regular form. That's what this is. And here we can do export function. You can do export default or export function, either way. And we're going to call it login. All right, and it's going to return a form, basically. We need a form. Now, in order for a React form to work, what do we need to have? I'll give you a tip. We got to import it from React.
Are you talking about the token?
No. Any form that you build in React, in order for it to be a controlled input React form, what do you need to use?
An input?
No, that's not it either.
Oh, yeah, use state.
Yeah, that's right. Use state. So we're going to use state here. Constant. We're going to have a form. Set form. That's going to be equal to use state. And we're going to default this to our default values. This is where the API is going to tell us what we need. So let me go look at the README for set API. This is where you read API documentation. Okay, so the API documentation says it's going to need a username, all lowercase. We're going to set that right now to an empty string. And it also needs a password, all lowercase. And we're going to set that to a string. So that's our default state value. We now have it named by what it's going to be. This is what our form is going to handle, are these empty strings.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have that, let's build out our first input. We're going to build out username input. Okay, we know our input's going to have a series of values. First, we're going to set the type of the input. The type is going to be text. It's going to be just regular text input. We'll give it a placeholder. So it's got a description inside the input of what it is, and we'll call it username. All right, now the next two are real important. We have to give this a value. And what value is on an input, that's the value that's displayed to the screen. So that's what the user sees inside of the text input as they're typing in. They're going to see the value.
Do we need a comma at the end of each of type and placeholder?
Nope, not inside JSX.
Okay.
So the value is going to be what we want the user to see. This is what makes the form reactive, or the React way. It makes it a controlled input. We don't want them to see the actual key that they're typing in. We want them to see the value of state.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to set this to form dot username. So they're not going to see the keys they're typing per se. They're going to see whatever this value is right here.
And why is it form.username? Like how
Because
do you...
it's form
Gotcha.
is our use state value, and we're going to the username key inside that form object.
Okay.
Basically, this default object is set the form.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have our value. And what makes it a controlled input is the onChange command. And this is always going to be a callback function. I normally write them in here. You can make handler functions like handle change and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, a lot of them are normally simple enough. You can just write them right in the input. So on change, we're going to set form because we want to make it controlled. Right now, the user's only seeing what's displayed in state. They're not seeing what keys they're actually typing. So in order for them to see what they're typing, we need to, every time it changes, that key value gets set to state, returns here, and then shows back up in the value. And that's what makes it that controlled loop, that controlled loop of React. So we're going to set form. Set form is going to be an object. And I got to remember, do I have to spread out form here?
We did.
Look at it. Yep, I do have to spread it out. There's more than one object in there, so we're going to spread out form. And that basically opens it up. That gives us access to changing username or password individually. Like if you didn't have that and you called set form e.target.name, e.target.value, whenever you typed it in, it would eliminate password completely. And then when you typed in password, it would eliminate username completely. So by it spreading it out, when we're saying we're spreading it out, we're giving ourselves a copy of it and access to what's inside of it. So now we can give it the, we gotta pass our event in, which I just call E. We're gonna give it e.target.name. And we're gonna set that to e.target.value. And don't confuse these. This value and this value are not the same. The target value is the actual key value that's being pressed the moment that's changed. And it's taking that key value and it's setting it to state. And then state is then sending it back to the input and displaying it here. But you notice we're missing something, aren't we? We got to set into the target name. Well, this target doesn't have a name. So we have to give it a name.
Username? Name? Username?
No, we're just going to call it name.
Name.
Yeah, the E target name. These match up. This name is going to be username.
That's what I said.
Yeah, but you got to call it name first. So yeah, that's basically what we're doing. We're giving it a username. So what this is going to do is every time it changes, it's going to check the target name, username. It's going to go up here in the state and set username to that value. So, well, let's go check and see if this works. Let's import it into app.
Can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
I'm a slow typer this morning. K dot.
Oh, I see Deeja's joined us.
Hey.
Hi guys.
Hey, Deja.
I have a question. What do you call those things on like form and set form? Like, what is the name for those?
What, right here?
Yeah, like the vocabulary name. Well, on line 4, like.
They call them getters and setters just by the terminology. Basically, this is the getter and this is the setter. But basically the way I see it is this is a variable. Just like if you said like const name equals John.
Yeah.
Name is a variable. This is a variable. The difference is this is a constantly changing variable. And what this function does here, this is actually a function. The set function sets that variable to the current value and basically changes it to whatever you put into it.
Yeah, which is why we do it on the on change.
Exactly.
Well, I
Can
see.
you have multiple of those?
What's that?
You have multiple on the same use.
On the same use state? No, use state only takes in it only returns 2 parameters. Form, it returns the getter and setter. That's all it returns.
Ah, okay.
So I see where you get the E for on change, because that's your variable that you've set event, essentially. And I see where name comes from because name is our input, but where does target come from? And can you use any name or does it have to be target?
It has to be target. Target is it's a reserved word in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Target basically tells the browser the target of whatever you're putting in. So
Okay.
like let me import this in and I can explain it to you.
Isn't that like whatever you click on, the target?
Yeah, exactly. Click on or whatever you're typing in. My autofill not working is irritating me.
Why is it not working? That's odd.
I don't know.
Did you change the settings?
It does that from time to time. I've never figured it out. Okay, so we got login here. Let's save that. And under here, we're going to bring in our login.
And why did we have to bring login as a individual object instead of just import login?
Because I exported it individually up here.
Gotcha.
So now we have our login. If you see it displayed over here, it's got our placeholder value.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes this the target is the moment I click in here, that's now the target according to the browser. So this is the event and the target of the event. So basically say I'm targeting this input and this input's name is username. And this input's value is going to be whatever I type in.
So it's not a click event yet because we haven't set, it's just the on change.
Correct. It's just on change. So every key that I press, like when I press A basically says, okay, I have the e.target.name of username and I have the value of A. And I'm setting that form to username A.
So the state is going from essentially my computer, my browser, to the index and then to this app JS.
to app.js and then to index. Like if you want to understand the flow of the form,
Mm-hmm.
basically the moment I pushed A, it
Mm-hmm.
picked up an on change. The browser did.
Mm-hmm.
And when it sees the on change of this input, because that's what we're focused on when we clicked in it, it goes, okay, I need to set form to the target name, which the target is the input that we're on. All right, which is username, and the value, which is the key I just pressed of A. It sets the state to the form value of username A. And then how it's displayed back on our screen is right here. It says, okay, now display the value of whatever the form username value is. Like here, I could give you kind of an example. Like let's say I just take this value out and I put in there hello.
Mm-hmm.
Now the value is hello.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what I type, I'm punching keys, it always says hello.
So it goes from browser to your index.js to your app.js to the login.js. And then the login is where our form is setting everything.
Yep, this is where we're setting our inputs to this state object.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we know we need 2 of these for the login. So the easiest way I found to do this is when you build one and you got it working, you literally just grab it, copy it, bring it down, paste it in. Now you have a second one. So if we save, if you look now, we have 2 of them that say username. Well, we know this one's not going to be username anymore. It's going to be for the password. So this is going to match the name of our object, which coincides with what our API wants to see. All right, now we're going to set the type to password. And the reason why we set the type to password, all this does is it takes it from being able to see the text to where it'll show you those little dots as you type it in, so nobody can look over your shoulder and see. We'll change the placeholder so whoever's using this knows what goes in here. That's weird. Now it'll say password. Yeah, but the type here, like let's say, yeah, you want to see something neat? I have this, actually, no, it won't work that way anymore. That's not supposed to be form.value. That's supposed to be form.username. And this is going to be like, let's say I have this set to form.username as well. Now, let's say I'm typing in the password here. It will actually not do anything. But if I type it in here, it works. And you see how it's filling that one up too? Like if I'm typing in Chris, you see how my other part's filling?
Mm-hmm.
Because down here, we have the value set for username still.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever this username value is, that's what it's displaying here.
And I have done that before.
Yeah, so you want to change that to password. So it knows to go after the form.password value. And now we're 100% controlled. I could type in Chris, and then I could type in a password, and it shows me the little dots. So if I had this, let's say I didn't have a type at all, or I had this set to like text, it would literally show me what I'm typing. So just the trick little, convention, industry standard, just type it in as password. It's kind of like a built-in validation / privacy thing to where it just shows those dots. So now we have 100% controlled input. Now we need a way to submit this input. We got to send this stuff to the API. And how we're going to send it is through a button.
Do we, for the target, do we change that to dot password?
For down here?
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Why not?
Because this is referencing the target name, which is already set the password here.
Gotcha. I keep that just.
So yeah, you can literally reuse this onChange function over and over and over again if you wanted to. Like truthfully, if I had an input that was 10 or 12 strong, I would have this in a helper function at that point. The on change would have a handle change function that's setting that by the target name and the value. So you didn't have to copy it multiple times.
I guess it's what's confusing to me because when you see that it's event, that's on line 15, but the target name is on 911. And in my head, I'm thinking the computer's reading from top down. So how does it find username if it's after on change?
Well, it's reading top down, and as it goes through top down, it's storing that in memory. So
Okay.
once it has this, it has it. So after it has it, you can always reference it.
So essentially it's looping back.
Yeah, it's looking up here going, oh, it's the username. Let me put that in here. Okay, the value is just what the event key press was. So let me put that here, and I'm going to set that here.
That's what I didn't understand what was going on, is that it's just reading this information, saving that information, and then using it when it gets to a function, essentially.
Yep, that's how it works. And now we have to have a way to submit the form. And we're going to do that with a button. We'll call the button a login button. So now we should have a little button that shows up, says login. All right, now the login button, and here's the key for this. Anytime you have a form and you want to create a submit action, or you want to submit the data in that form with a button, that button has to be inside of the form tag to work. If you have this button on the outside of the form tag, it will not work. You'll have to type out a separate function to make that button work. So the submit buttons for forms should always be inside. And you can set the type of that button to just equal submit. And when you set the type like this, what that's going to tell you is to run your on submit function. So we're going to write that on submit function right now, because right now it's not doing anything. If you click login, oh, you see what it's doing though? It's refreshing as well, because this form has a default of refreshing. So we got to fix that while we're at it. So let's go ahead and let's make a function.
How does the form have, is it just that's the way the default is set up, is to do a refresh? And
Yeah,
so,
that's the way all browsers are set up through JavaScript, is anytime a submit action is run on a form, it refreshes the page.
gotcha.
So we're doing React. Refreshing is bad in React. We want no refreshes.
Right.
So let's build us a function. We're going to call it a const. We'll call it a handle submit. That seems to be popular. We're going to handle submit, and that's going to equal a fat arrow function that's going to take in an event. All right, so the first thing we know we want to do is we want to prevent default. Basically telling the browser, hey, whatever your default values are, no matter what they are, we don't want to use them. We want you to do exactly what we tell you to do. And that's it. All right, so we created that function. Now we got to tie that to our form. And how we do that is inside our upper form tag, we call on submit. We set that equal to our handle submit function. And that's it. Now, if you look, when we click this, we no longer get refreshing, because it's basically saying, okay, it's type submit, ties it to the form. On submit, we're going to run this function. Oh, we're preventing default. My default's to refresh. I'm not going to do that. Now, it's not doing anything else, but it's preventing that refresh. Now, we know on our handle submit, when this form's filled out, we want to send that data to our API. So we have to bring in something to do that. So what would we bring in to do that? Anybody got an idea?
Ask the question again, please.
We want to be able to send this data to the API, what we're filling out. But we need to import something to do that. Anybody know what we would bring in to do that?
Axios.
Almost. Remember, we don't have to use Axios anymore because we created our own Axios here.
Wait, say that again. Your what?
We don't have to use Axios anymore because we created our own Axios function
Oh,
here.
yeah. I mean, like before that, like you was like you have to bring in. You was talking about bringing something in.
Yeah, we have to import something to basically post this to our API. So we have to import something in here.
Right.
Most of the API.
We're going to import our API function.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we're in components. This is where the autofill really gets bad. So we're going to go up 2 levels. We're going to go into utils and bring in API.
So how does that save us typing by creating the function as API instead of just leaving it as Axios?
When you're creating the function as API, it saves you typing because it's going to send all this header information and the base URL.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't save you the typing on the import. Where it saves you the typing is what we're about to do.
Gotcha.
We just brought in API. So now we prevented default. We're going to call API dot post rather than Axios dot post. And in here, instead of writing that whole URL and everything, we're just going to type in API login. That's all we need. Don't have to type the whole string anymore.
Nice.
And then what we're going to send for that API login is we're going to send our form object. So all that type in the long one, if we had basically without this to do the validation, we would have literally had to just type all of this out in there. Now we don't have to do that because we have it created once here. So as we do our posts, our puts, our deletes, our gets, you can run them all through this API function and shorthand the rest of it. So we're going to post the form and then we're going to get a response. So this works just like Axios or anything else. You go after it runs, then what happens is we're going to get a response. So we're going to console log that response. Because we always want to console log it and see what we're getting back when we make a call. We should be getting back a token. If our username and password is correct with what the API has stored, we should be getting back a token. So let me see if I changed it in here. I probably did. Yes. Okay, so our username is Lambda School. However, for me, I went in and changed the password to 1234 rather than I heart Lambda stuff. So if you still have that, you're going to have to use the password that's in the README. So before we submit that, let's inspect this and look at our console because we're going to be expecting something back. Right now we have nothing. So let's say I put in the password wrong. Let's submit it. Oh, we get an error. We're forbidden. Oh, that's such a cruel term. You are forbidden. All right, so we know something's wrong with our error. Did you notice that popped up without having an error message in here?
That's what I was going to ask is.
I could tell you why that does that.
Yes.
It does that because the API is programmed to send a response, an error response.
Nice.
So this is our actual response we're getting on the .then. So if you have like an error down here, like .catch, the error, and you console.log that error, the only error that's going to log is if it catches an error in communicating with the API. Like let's say you send something to the API and you don't get a response or it doesn't exist, like the 404 page not found.
Right.
That's this error. Any of these other errors that you see 403 forbidden, like sometimes you'll get a success code that says like 201, post success. That's all coming from the API, and those are all coming in the .then response. Yeah, so let's put the password in right and see what we get. Oh, we just got an object back. This is the object that we just got back. And you can see our payload is our token. And see our status here, 200.
Mhm.
That's just like the 403 that we just saw, except the 200 means everything's good.
Gotcha.
So it's just going to send us that object back with it. And you can see in here, the URL is our full URL with API and login. This part here was set by our create function that we made in our API component.
Mhm.
This data here is what we just sent. And if you look, headers is an object. Headers, content length, content type, all this stuff, that's all pre-programmed, most of it by us in the headers in that create. We gave it the content type, application JSON. It automatically set the character set. But yeah, if you look, the header did not send the token because we don't have it yet. So now we just got this token. And we know our response is data.payload. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call just local storage. All right, we're going to set that item. So now we're setting an item in local storage. If I could type. We're going to set that item. The name of the item we're going to set, we're going to name it token. All right, we're going to set the item token. And what we're going to set it to is the response.data. Okay, so we went one level into data. We need to go one more deeper, the payload. Okay, now we'll save this. Everything will probably clear out. We see nothing. Let's go into application. Let's clear our local storage. You can see nothing's in local storage now.
What is local storage?
That is memory that the browser uses inside the computer that remembers, it stores it into the memory of the computer by the web page you visit, and it doesn't erase it.
Gotcha.
So like if you shut your computer down, it's not random access memory. It's actually stored on the hard drive inside the browser's file.
So is it the cache?
No, cache is different.
Gotcha.
Cache, I believe, expires.
Gotcha.
Local storage is there. It's there forever, actually, until you erase it or you run a function or something runs a function, a browser you go to that erases it. It'll be there forever. Like you saw that token that was just there.
Mhm.
That token's been there since I did the sprint challenge.
And so when you are storing cookies, cookies are stored in local storage?
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Like I don't think I have any cookies for the localhost 3000. Yeah, cookies we haven't learned about yet. I'm not sure 100% how they work, but
I have some cookies.
you have some cookies? Cookies.
I have some cookies too.
So now that we have this set up, let's see if it works. Now we got everything saved. We're gonna log in again. We're gonna put in our password. I'm gonna log in. We should see this populate with that token. Oh, there it is. We called it token. Token is what we decided we're gonna name that item in local storage. And we're setting it to this weird code that we got from our response. And we knew that because we console logged our response.
And what is payload?
Payload is when we console logged our response. We were looking for the authorization token. So we said we knew we got this object back. We have a data object. It's got a payload of this long number that looks like our security token.
Gotcha.
So we set it to basically the response is this whole thing. We went into data, and then we went one level deep to payload to get to our value.
Gotcha.
So now we have that in local storage.
So how do we, like, if you wanted multiple logins, or multiple people to be able to log in with different, because so far we've only logged in with Lambda School and iHeart Lambda. If your project like required multiple people to log in to the app, how does that work?
When they set up the backend, they automatically generate these tokens and give them expiration dates.
Okay,
And-
so it's not front end.
Yeah, correct. And each token is assigned to a different user. So you'll see like one of the things that tell you, I think it was a stretch goal, is to create a let's say you wanted to log out.
Mhm.
All right, because right now this token's stored. So like if I walked away from my computer and somebody else went into this application and decided they were going to go to a protected route, it would let them because the token's there.
Right.
When you create a log out button, like you create a separate button that's log out, all that button does is it clears the local storage. It'll say, basically set item token to an empty string. And at that point, you're logged out.
Okay.
I'm like a little kid.
So we have our going, and this part here, that's what makes our API component start working now for all routes, because now we have a token that it's getting, and it'll send that in the header. So let's say we wanted to do a GET request. Let's see here. I think it's got a GET request. Yeah, let's do a GET request. So let's make another component to do the GET request. We'll call this this file. I don't know, is it color list that we do the GET?
I think so, because we're grabbing colors.
I think it comes from a level up.
We have to, let me see.
Is it an
Focus on
app?
Colors and then color list. Where's my bubbles? There's bubbles.
Bubbles page. Okay, it does it in the bubbles page is where it does the GET request. We're gonna go. We'll make a different file. We'll call this let's call this we'll call it color GET, because we're probably not going to build out this whole application, but I just want to be able to show you how to get the data and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to display this data. So we're going to import React from React. All right, and then we need to import our API call. So we're going to import API from, and that's the beauty of this API function, is you only import Axios into that. You can use that for your GET request. You can use it for unauthorized GET requests. It's just going to send a header as undefined. So you can keep using it over and over and over. Okay, and then we'll export a function called colorGet. And it's not going to take in a value. Okay, we're going to return. At this point, we'll just return an empty div. All right, let's go ahead, and while we have that, let's import that into our app. So let's import. That way we can get it running on app so we know what we have.
You can't see what you're typing.
You can't up here?
I saw.
Can you?
I see.
Can you see it?
I see the color get.js, but you said we're going to import into our app, and I heard clicking. I didn't see where that was happening.
Oh, I'm doing it right now. Can you see it right now? Import colorGet.
Nope.
You're not seeing anything I'm typing?
Mm-mm.
What happened there? Oh, please restart screen sharing. Stopped. Okay. That's why. Is it working now? All right, let me just stop the share. Share.
Oh, it just seems like
Share. Working now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
All right, we're going to import colorGet from components
Login.
/colorGet. And we'll just display that down here. It's not going to display anything right now, but this way our console logs will work. So when we're console logging app that's mounted, we'll see it. So we're going to go into color get, and we're going to make a get request. So now we can just call API dot get, and all we have to do is get from API / colors. That's our endpoint. We don't have to type in all that stuff anymore. So then we're going to do a dot then a response, that arrow function, and we're going to console log the response just to see what we get back. Okay, so now we have our token. So now if we go in our console, we've got it.
Okay, I'm catching up on typing.
Okay. So this GET request that we just fired off returned us this. We got an array of the colors.
Here.
So like if I did something, let's say I cleared local storage out and I did a refresh. We're forbidden. We cannot get to colors. It won't let us have access to that data because we don't have a token.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get our token back. Log in. Now we logged in. Our header's okay. So now we have that. So now if we refresh, we should see that data. And there it is. And truthfully, this should be, all GET requests should be in a use effect hook. Because GET requests have side effects. They could constantly, GET's pretty much an open window. It can keep getting, it can keep running. And you don't want that to happen. So we're gonna put this around use effect, which is a callback. And always requires that dependency array. So let's cut this. All of it, yeah. So we'll cut that and we're gonna drop that right in here. So now it'll only run the first time. So, and here's where router comes into play too. Like if right now we're all on the same component. And let's say I cleared a local storage and I refresh this page. Okay, so I went to this page. I cannot get in. I'm gonna put my name and my password in and click login. All right, I've got my local storage set now, but I still didn't get my data because I'm on the same page. Why didn't I get this? Because it only runs on the use effect only runs on the initial re-render. So because we're in the same component, it's not going to re-render. But if you had router redirecting you to different components, it would trigger the render at that point. And there is also, there's different ways to do that too. Like if you, like the easiest way to do it, it's against the Okay, that was weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my Zoom's acting up. Imagine that. Let's share this again. All right. So where was I? Oh, easiest way to trigger a re-render. Well, the easiest way to trigger one is a refresh. It's not the React way, but let's say we went in here, we cleared out our local storage. We went into our login form, and we did not prevent the default. Okay, we did that. Now we did not prevent the default. We are forbidden from getting colors, but if I go to username and password, log in, it refreshes. I should have given me that. Why did it not do that? Huh. Oh, it's not setting it now. I must be didn't like that. Ah, it's refreshing before it does the call. That's what it is. So, either way, you can refresh it and it'll trigger that re-render. I like to do it a different way, which I'll show you guys. Is if I'm depending on a GET request to get data,
Mm-hmm.
I have what I run like a use state toggle function that triggers a re-render, and I run it in wherever my GET request is. Like my GET request happens to be in color get with use effect. So what I'll do is I'll bring in use state. And I'll call a const of, we can't use render and re-render because they're reserved words, but we'll call it, what's a good name for it to use this time? Trigger. And set trigger. And what this is gonna do, it's like a light switch, like a toggle switch. I'm gonna set it initially to false. And then I'm gonna have use effect watch that trigger value. And use effect does not care what this value is. Use effect is only watching for this value to change. And if it changes, it'll re-render.
And
So,
where's the render?
actually, I can't do it here. What am I doing? Well, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this as like a light switch that's on and off, to where every time that switch is flipped, it re-renders to the API and gets the data.
Okay. So we haven't typed that code yet.
Correct. No, and I'm just thinking about the way I laid this out. It's not going to work here because I can't pass it to the other function. So we're going to get rid of this here, and we're going to end up bringing it in as props. I'll show you that. We're going to go to the highest level of where we need the two to communicate, because we have login. Login's running a function that we want to trigger the re-render. All right, and we got to trigger the re-render and color get, and they live on the same level of the tree. So in order for them to share any functionality, we have to go to the upper level and pass it down.
Mm-hmm.
So our upper level is app. So in app here, we are going to bring in our use state. And we are going to set that up as a const of trigger, set trigger, and we'll make that equal to use state, and we'll make it false. And then we're going to pass into our login component, we're going to pass the set trigger function. As a prop. And then in our color get, this is where our get request is. We're going to set the trigger as a prop. Just the value of trigger. Okay, do you guys kind of understand what's about to happen here?
Mm-hmm. Just playing catch up on typing.
Okay. All right. I'll explain it anyway. We're going to use our login component to set this trigger. And then we're going to use our color get where we're doing our get request. We're going to have this so use effect can watch this trigger value for it to change, to trigger the re-render. So did you catch up, Denise?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You get that?
Yeah.
So
the login, the color get, you're just toggling back and forth. Doesn't matter which.
yeah, the color get, we're just going to send that the value for use effect to watch. That's all we're sending to it. Here, use effect, we want you to watch this to change.
Yeah, and you have trigger and the use effect dependency, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where it's going to be. Yep.
So trigger is the initial value and set trigger is the update each time.
Yep. And I'm going to show you where we're going to do that, because we actually have to, in our login, we also have to pass the same value of trigger. And I'll explain why. In order for our toggle function to work, we need to know what the value is currently, so it could change it to something different. Because if we change it to the same value, it's not going to trigger the change. So like if we know this is false, let's say we go into our login and we just set it to true, that'll work one time.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time we try and click it or do it again, it's just going to keep setting it to true. UseEffect's going to say, hey, that's the same Boolean value. I'm not triggering a re-render. We want to be able to set it to the opposite of what it is to trigger a re-render each time. So let's go into our login component and do that. All right, our login component, we are now getting props. All right, so we have our handle submit. We're going to prevent the default, so we're preventing the refresh. We're going to post this login, and then after this information comes back, we're going to set the item. All right, now after this information comes back, that's when we want to trigger it. If we trigger it beforehand, it'll run that code before we get a response from the API and it won't work. So just remember the .them response, you're basically following this as a chain of events.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to prevent the default, then I want to make a post. I'm going to post this data. When it sends me back the data, that's the .then. Then that response, I want to set my token to that payload. And then after that, I want to call props.setTrigger. And what we're going to set that to is not, exclamation point, the opposite of props.trigger. So if that trigger value is true, this will set it to false. That trigger value is false, it will set it to true. You get how that works?
So whatever, it's setting it to whatever the opposite of whatever trigger is currently at.
Correct. That's why we needed that trigger value passed in.
Mm-hmm.
So now this handle submit function is going to change that value each time this button is clicked or this form is submitted. Now in our color get, we're going to have props coming in now too, because we set it to trigger value. And we want UseEffect to just watch it. So UseEffect is going to watch that props.trigger method to change and call a re-render. So now if we clear our value and we refresh the page, we should get 403 forbidden. We can't use this. You know, it doesn't exist. We type in our username and password. Now, when we do this, it should trigger UseEffect after everything comes back to do a re-render and give us our object data back. There it is, right there. So problem solved. We weren't getting the refresh to get our data from the GET request, and now we are.
Why is your, I'm looking at your color get, your use effect, your use state looks like it's being used, but in my console.
Oh, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So you kind of see where that API is saving us typing now?
Yes.
Because on this GET request, we would have to send that header with the token each time we did it. So this would be a lot larger. And we did it one time here. So we've used this API twice now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that works. That's it's about what we got there. I know you guys want to do like a full unit review. I know you guys want to use Redux. So I don't want to build any components out yet until we use Redux.
Gotcha.
And put and delete. Anybody got questions on those, or are you guys comfortable with those?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with it. It's the same thing as anything else, like all the like the get stuff like that.
Okay, we'll skip that part then.
I do have a question on like like when you draw the circles for like the components. You know how Dustin like does that stuff like when he's like before he makes components.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering like how do you go about writing it? Like do you like does the string like does that line represent what's inside that what's going to be inside the like component or something like that? You make sense of?
I can kind of show you. I think you're talking about something similar to I do. I use a program called Pencil to do it.
Yeah. I like Whimsical. Whimsical's
Yeah.
really easy to use.
Like here, I brought up a real quick one we started our Build Week project on. And like, yeah, you talking about something like we built on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so like because I'm confused on like if you draw the lines based on how you want the application to like click through stuff.
Yeah,
Or,
you set it by the flow.
okay, so because like if like for example I'm drawing a nav, right? You see how you have a nav? You're gonna have a link. That nav has a link to category list and fun fact, but it doesn't have those components in that nav, right?
Correct. It's got a
Okay.
link in it.
It's got a link to it. Okay, yeah, I was just
Yeah.
making sure I was like writing it the right way because it's just kind of weird that like it
And
goes.
I get it's the way you think about it because like app has the search and the nav components in there. And
Yeah,
truthfully, technically, nav has category list and fun facts as components in it as well. You just don't see them because they're wrapped in a route.
wrapping her out.
Yeah, you have the route set with a link to them, and the nav is the link to with the route to that component. So that component actually gets imported technically into nav, but it's not imported into nav, if you know what I mean.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because like you don't physically type out component equals category list. You just have the route that pushes to the category list, right?
Yeah, like the routes normally all live in app. So category list is imported, like typed imported into app.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the link to category list, which actually imports that component when you run it,
okay.
is there.
Yeah, because I was drawing it just like that, how you have it there. But like in my head, I'm always like, yeah, this is how I'm writing it how I would want people to click on the application, but it's not so much where the components going to be are in the code.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean that works too. It all depends on it. It comes down to what makes sense in your head to make it effective.
All
To
right.
make it to you do something like this to save yourself time. That's the whole point behind it.
Yeah. And
So
at the same time, I'm sharing it with other people, so like I don't want to get them confused.
yeah, I mean everybody does it differently. I do it by the components I want to build. Okay, these are the components that I'm going to build. Sometimes you'll build components that if you're doing it your way, if there's not a link or it's a component that's just going to be imported directly into app and not go anywhere. Your way, you wouldn't even have that label on the tree. It might be in like the in the block up here describing what's in here.
Yeah.
The way I always like to do is what components do I need? Let me lay all them out. How do those how are them components going to connect to one another? What's the flow of the app going to be? And that's why I do it this way. But it's all about what makes sense to you.
All right. Cool. Makes me feel better. Yeah, because I drew some big ass freaking tree. I'm like, yo, this thing it looks so messy.
You want to see what my build week tree looks like for this build week? I'll make you laugh. Oh, where'd it go?
I bought an iPad and Apple Pencil just for this, like just to draw.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Let me just close this and bring it back up. Yeah, our tree for our build week projects is real simple. It's this one. That's it.
Yeah. Very simple.
You got app. It's going to have a login and a register and a quiz that you take for like whether the celebrity's dead or alive.
Yeah.
The route from the quiz, if you want to save your score or get to use your dashboard, you have to either log in or register after you take the quiz. If you log in or register already before that, it all ends at the dashboard, which shows you your username, your high score, your previous scores, and we'll have buttons there that allow you to, I'm going to add to this, it's going to have like an edit user and delete account.
I got a really hard one, man. Damn, I wish I had.
Celebrity dead or alive. This
Dirty.
is the app layout for it.
Wait, so the app is there. Okay. So when you enter the app, there's the quiz. You don't log in right away. Is that
The options there. You'll have a login button, a register button, or the take the quiz button. And depending on what button you click in that in the app is what direction it takes you.
gotcha?
But according to the MVP that we read, you're supposed to be allowed to take the quiz without being registered or logging in. So you can like just visit this and take the quiz.
Okay.
So you'll be able to take the quiz without a token. But once you complete that quiz, if you want to store your score or update it to your high scores or whatnot, then you have to either register or log in. And then what that does is it'll take you to a dashboard and it'll carry the score with it and put it in your account.
Got you.
That's it. Trying to think here what we should visit next. How about we visit
Redux?
shall we? What's that? Redux? Everybody want to do some Redux?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Redux is so much fun. I'm looking forward to this. Yay. All right, let me bring up some Redux reference here. All right, let's see here. Start with index. All right, well, the first thing we know we need to do is we need to add Redux.
What's the importance of Redux? Like, why Redux?
Immutable state. It fixes the problem of mutating objects through the course of an application. Because even though you set the variable to const, the const only reserves the variable name. You can still change the object data inside of it if it's an object or an array for that matter. So Redux makes it to where it basically locks that down and you create copies of it and disperse that.
Okay.
We have to add React Redux as well. So Redux and React Redux. So if we take a look at our package JSON, we should be getting both of those. There's Redux. We'll wait for React Redux to show up. And you guys want to use the thunk while we're at it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You guys want to thunk it up? Okay.
I pretty much forgot everything right now.
All right, let's bring in the thunk. All right. What do they call that? Let me look at the package here. That is called Redux Thunk. We'll bring in the thunk. All right, and we have the thunk. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start in index. Should we start an index? Actually, you know what? Let's first thing let's do. Let's create a reducer. I'm gonna put it in utils. It's gonna be a new file. It's gonna be reducer.js. Reducer is a pure function. You remember him grilling that into our heads? Reducer is a pure function.
No.
So the reducer function does not take in React or anything along that line. It doesn't need it because it's just a pure JavaScript function. But the way we're going to use the reducer is to, let me see, where is it at? We're going to use it to make basically like Axios calls. But we're going to do our Axios calls in our action. So our reducer, the only point of the reducer is it controls state. It does nothing else. It makes changes to whatever your initial state is. So we're going to set up a const called initial state. Okay, so our initial state is going to be equal to an object. Let's think about what we want this object to be. Let's take a look at the way our apps run. Let me clear this local storage out and redo this. Log in, see what I get in the console. Okay, so we have two different data sets we're getting back that we can use for state. We have a config, we have a header, we have that, or we can use the array methods. Okay, how about we set this to initial state? The colors. So we're gonna make an initial state object look like one of these colors, let's say. Actually, you know what? You guys mind taking a break real quick?
Sure.
Come on.
Let's take a quick break and we'll go through that when I get back.
So how's everybody's break going?
Mine's pretty good. How's yours?
Lola?
Hey. I miss you guys.
I missed you too.
Did you guys eat lots of delicious food? Your
I-
break?
I'm
You did.
Yeah,
Yourself.
I'm catching up on all the sleep I've missed.
Right? I know. I keep like sleeping really late and then like waking up like in a panic, like, oh no, I missed lecture.
That happened to me the first day. I was like, okay, we can't be dreaming about code anymore. Okay, we're on break. Like,
It's good though. I feel like I'm healing. I don't know what I'm healing, but that's how I feel.
Hector, how's your break?
I'm good. I've just been doing like a lot of extra like work hours since I have a lot of free time now.
Oh man, you didn't get to go home to.
Huh? Well, I can't. Well, I mean, I work in my neighborhood, so it's like I do Uber Eats, so I don't really stay at home for orders. But I mean, I can stop whenever. It's not like they're forcing me to work.
What's the name of that place? The place that you come from. You know that synagogue. You didn't get to go home. To synagogue this weekend. Oh man. It's okay. It's okay. Maybe you'll get to go for summer break. Synagogue.
Does Lambda have spring break?
Ah,
Nah.
No, summer break.
Mm-hmm. July 4th.
and then we're done.
Right. Oh my.
Oh, speaking of which, labs. Stella, do you do labs at the same time we do labs?
Like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, will I be in labs by the time you guys are in labs? Like, will I?
Mhm. Yeah.
A great question. I really don't know.
I don't think so because you basically started over, didn't you, Stella?
I'm pretty sure that's what happened. I like haven't really like thought about it because it's like gives me anxiety to think about.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think so because like when are you guys like officially
February. They already
Yep.
because somebody's already put like, and maybe it was in the web channel, a thing about if you have a labs idea, and I might have a labs idea that needs a data science person. If things work out.
what is it?
Because I'm always talking to people. So we have a local, like little mom and pop grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
and they do not like their existing inventory tracking system. And I was like, I have labs. And so I'm kind of wheeling and dealing with them to say, hey, we could create a custom app for you. And if you like it, you can pay us for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that for my father's business because he uses invoices to like make orders, and I do it for him. Like I'm doing the invoices for him, and it's like those invoices are like so disorganized.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Yes.
All right. All right, so I created an initial state. I actually thought about this while we were taking a quick break. Basically, I've got a loading at false. I have an errors that's empty. And then I have the colors, which is an empty object, because that's what we're going to get back from our API and put in our Redux store. And the reason why I have the initial state set up like this is because we're going to use Thunk. So we're allowed to run multiple dispatches through a single action. So when we use Thunk, we can have this loading. We can set that to true. And let's say we had a spinner or like app is loading, or we had a component like that. We can have it conditionally render that component while this part of state is true. So if you have an API that it takes a while to get to, you can use the thunk to set when the initial state set loading is true to where it runs loading. And then after the second dispatch comes back with a then response, it sets it back to false and renders your component with the data that it got back. And it can also use thunk to, if it gets an error, to display the error in state, and then you can have that conditionally render to an error component as well. So it gives you all those options of how to make your user experience better. So rather than clicking on something and looking like nothing's happening, you can have it immediately display its loading, or have the little wheel spin. Or if you click on something and let's say you get an error back, rather than just getting that random, like right now we deal with console errors, or it'll see something like really disgusting, you can have a nice pretty component that conditionally renders that error when it comes back by setting it to state. So we're going to set up our initial state like this. This is basically for the app if it's loading on that call through the reducer, if it errors in the reducer, or the actual payload that we're going to get back that we're going to set the state. So you just want to set your initial state object up to the type of data that you're going to want. And now we're going to call an export of our function that's going to be our reducer. We'll call it a reducer. And our reducer takes in 2 arguments. It takes in state is the first one. And the second one is our action, which an action is what they're functions that you run to change state. Like let's say I'm somewhere in the app and I want to run a function that's going to basically set my colors data with the API call. All right, well that's going to be an action, and that action is going to run through this reducer, and the reducer is actually the function that changes that state. That's what keeps it immutable.
So we don't need a semicolon at the end of our export statement?
Not normally. Semicolons are they're optional in JavaScript.
Okay.
You don't have to have them.
And we don't have to import anything?
Here, not yet.
Okay.
I left a couple lines up here because we will be in a minute.
Okay.
Makes it a little easier. So we got our reducer function. Now, the way the reducer works is, well, we're using Redux. So when we use Redux, we're going to basically to set our state equal to the initial state. And that basically sets the state value to this in our reducer. Now, our reducer works on what they call switch and cases. And what that's like is, it's almost like a giant if-else-if statement without having to type it out. And it's lighter weight. It doesn't have to run through the whole tree of, going if, else if on the way down. What it'll do is it'll say, okay, I have a switch. And depending on what those cases are, that's what I want to run. So it won't be running the whole function to go if, else if. It'll look for a case. Okay, the case is to add this. So that's what I'm going to run. And how that works is you type it in as switch, because we're creating a switch. And the switch takes in an action type. And what the action type is the type of action that we want to trigger our case.
Mm-hmm.
So action is basically the object that we're going to send in through our action functions. It's going to send in here, and it's going to say, okay, what's the type of that object? If the type is to add colors, it'll run that add colors case. If the type is to delete colors, it'll run that delete colors case. So that's where it gets the type. That type directly ties into the cases. So the switch it's basically a function. The first one, we're going to have a case. In our first case, we're going to call it, we'll call it color start. And cases are all capitalized with underscores by convention.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the industry standard. So we're going to run a color start. That ends with a colon. All right. And what that does is the color start has a return method to each one. And whatever the return is in the reducer, the return is the new copy of state. It's never anything else. We're going to return what we want to change in state. So on this return, we're going to return an object because state is an object. We're basically replacing initial state with a new object that we're going to set to state. That object is going to spread out our state because we only want to change one part of this state. We don't want to replace the whole thing. So the spread operator creates a new copy of state opened up to change one individual item. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the loading. We're going to change the loading to true. And that's all you have to put in here. It won't touch the colors. It won't touch the error. It's going to set loading to true. And that's what it's going to return out of this case. And it's going to set state to that through the reducer. So now if we send in an action called color start, it would just make loading say true and disperse that across the app. Oh, I almost forgot another part of the case that we need. Cases always need a default. And our default is going to be to return state. So if this, for some reason, this reducer function runs, which it shouldn't, but if it does run, it's going to return our initial state object.
Gotcha.
Basically like starting over. All right, let's have another case. Let's do a case. Okay, the case, we'll kind of stick to the way class did. We're going to have color success. This case is going to be for if our API comes back with no errors that we run in our action, this is what we want to happen to state. So we're going to return a new state object. We're going to spread out that state. All right. Now we have success. So the first thing we know that we want to set our loading, we want to set that back to false because we're not loading anymore. We have success. So we're going to set loading back to false, and then we're going to set colors. Our colors key, we're going to set that to our action dot payload. So we're going to send out, this is where we're actually going to send data in. Okay, we have success. So whenever we have this action written out, that action's going to set the state to false, and it's probably going to be to take the data received from the API, and it's going to set it to colors, and that data is going to be sent into the reducer in an object called action with the key of payload. So that's how that ties together. And now we only need one more case, truthfully, because we just have to need an error case. So we'll have a case called color fail. Okay, so let's say our API failed and we want to display some cool data with the error. We would return we would return another state object that would take the error key of state, and it's going to set that to an action payload. In this case, the payload is going to be the error message. So that is our reducer.
So how does it know which payload because it's the payload that's associated with colors, or it's the payload that's associated with error, correct?
It does. It knows by the action type. Basically, the action functions return an object, and they have, the way we have it set up is they return 2 key value pairs inside that object. One of them is type, and one of them is payload. So the type is what the switch looks for, to know which one of these to run to modify state. And if it has a payload as the second type, that's where it's going to match that type to that payload. And let's say the type is fail, it's going to match the payload down here. The type is the color success, it's going to put that payload here.
Mm-hmm.
And change the state. And like our start has no payload, it's just basically running.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So here we have that, and you see that if you look, you notice that they're called by variable name. Cases are supposed to be strings. And I did that for a reason. This is something else that they say is convention, is we're going to create an action now in utilities. Did I put that in utilities? Yeah, we'll create an actions. We'll create a new file called actions. And these are our action functions. This is what's going to control the reducer. So in our actions, this is where our API call happens, basically. So we're going to import API from API. And then we're going to make some exports here. We are going to export a const. This is going to be color start, and we're going to set that equal to a string of color start. And the reason why they say that they do this is it eliminates typos, I guess, because if you have the an invalid string value, JavaScript doesn't know that's invalid. It sees a string as a string. So it won't throw an error to tell you what's wrong if you have a typo. But if you misspell a variable name, it'll throw an error saying that variable is not defined, or such is not defined. So it'll give you that error to help you debug your code. So that's the whole point behind doing these 3 that we're going to type in. And we're going to do another const called color. And the reason why we're doing them in the actions is because we use these variables in the actions as well as the reducer. That way you eliminate all the typos. And we'll do one more. Color fail. Have that equal to color fail. All right, so those are our 3 action cases saved as variables. So now if we have an error, we can track that. So now all we have left to do is create an action function. Oh, let's do, normally the way I do it is I keep multiple actions in one actions JavaScript file. So I just export them individually. We'll call this, we'll call it colors. It's going to be our colors action. And it's going to be, oh wait, I almost forgot to name it. Export function colors. This will be our action. It's going to take in some form of input. We're going to have to input something into this action. And let's see here. Oh, I almost forgot. It's I did this all wrong. Ignore this. I forgot about the thunk. We're going to export a const called colors. And that's going to be equal to a function that's going to take in an input, which is going to be a fat arrow that takes in dispatch, which is also a fat arrow that finally runs our function. And this is where the thunk comes in. Basically, the thunk is going to be multiple dispatches run in one function, because before, without the thunk with Redux, you could only run one dispatch. You'd only be able to dispatch one case per function. Now you have one function that, in our case, we want to dispatch 3 cases. We want to be able to run all 3 of these cases inside of this function, depending on what happens in it. So that's what thunk allows us to do. We can dispatch multiple times. So the first thing we want to do is, when this function's called, is we're going to dispatch. We're going to dispatch our first action. So we're going to dispatch an object with a type. This is our action object that we're typing out right now. So we're going to have a type of color start. So that's our first dispatch. What this is going to do is, the moment this function runs, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go through our reducer, and it's going to change our state to loading true. The moment we call this colors method. And then after that, we're going to do an API. Now that we said it's loading, we're going to make our API call. And we're going to make it a .get. And we're going to get from, what was our get request? Let me go into here. We're going to get this. So we're going to go get API colors. All right, so we got our .get, then we have a .then. It's basically an API call. Then we're going to get a response. And inside that response, we're going to know we get, let's see here. It looks like response.data is an array of objects of colors. So we're going to .them, we're going to go ahead and dispatch. Again, we're going to run our dispatch. We're going to send another action object that's going to have a type. A type is going to be, let me shorten that up. A type will be color success. And this one gets a second one. That's going to be the payload. Because now we're getting data back. And we want that payload to be the response.data. According to our object here, we have a response.data is going to be an array of 11 items. So that's what we're going to set in that dispatch. So on our .them request, like if it's successful, and our reducer is going to run this. And it's basically going to set loading back to false. And our colors is going to be our action payload. So our action, this is our action object. We have a type and a payload. So we get into our reducer. Okay, it sees the type. It's color success. We have a payload. It's going to be that action's payload. It's going to be set to colors. Matter of fact, I should make this an empty array because that's the way it's going to come back. All right, so we got one more left to make in this action.
Does that have to be wrapped in use effect since it's a .get request?
No, because we're pure at this point. We're not using React. It's not dependent on rendering.
Okay.
Use effect there is to control the rendering side effect. Like without use effect and you're changing state with use effect. You know, without use effect, it can run that get multiple times to keep changing state. When state changes, it keeps rendering, and that's where your loops come in. Because our actions and reducers are pure, this function's only going to run once because we're not depending on rendering the screen or state to do anything. So no use effect in here. Use effect's a part of React. Just remember that. If you don't need React, then you don't need use effect.
Hmm.
So now we're going to catch it. Catching it, we're going to get an error message. Just like we do with anything else. Okay, and on that, we're going to run dispatch again. This is where the thunk comes in. You notice we're on our third dispatch call on one action. And this one's going to be a type. We're going to give our action a type, which our type is going to be color fail. And it's going to take in a payload. And the payload is going to be, can anybody guess?
The payload is what if it, you got the res.data and this one's the fail. Like what? No, you don't want it to return nothing.
Error message.
Oh, makes sense.
We'll make it our error message. That'll be our fail. Okay, so now we have our action. We have our reducer. There's only one thing left in here.
Why is it just error instead of res.error?
Because, I mean, you can name it, that's just the way it comes back. Like, you're going to get a response here. This is also a response. The .then is the success response, which normally has something embedded in it, like a data or headers. The error response, like when it errors, the error response doesn't have anything embedded in it. It's just an error.
Mm-hmm.
So you can name these anything you want.
Right. But I mean on the payload. So for the payload for response, the payload is res.data.
Yeah.
Oh, that's because the parameter is called res, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's because it's named here response, and we want to go a level deep. If you look over here in our object in our browser,
Mm-hmm.
this is our response.
Mm-hmm.
We want just the data.
Okay.
So we're going response.data.
So
Now, if this errored out, we would not get this object.
right.
We would get that 403 forbidden error.
Right.
So that's why we don't have to go anything deeper. We're just going to return that as our error.
Gotcha.
To state. All right, so we have that. The only thing we have left to do is these guys. We're going to copy these, and we're going to bring them over in our reducer, and we're going to paste them in like this. But we're going to do it a little bit differently. Actually, that was pointless. We're going to import. We're just going to call it import, and we're going to import a destructured object like so. And we're going to call in color start, color success, and color fail. And those are all going to be coming from our, see, we're in utilities, so they're going to be coming from actions. And this is where we're going to get these into string variables. We're importing them in from our actions as these. That's why they're exported individually. So our actions and reducers are set. We are set to make this work. Now all we have left to do is to tie it in through Redux, because nothing we did here involved Redux in any way. So, so let's start tying it in. We're going to start at the top level and work our way down. We're going to, we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. Get rid of login. What's that?
That's a great point when you're like, nothing we did had to do with Redux, but it's like. It's just
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no part of what we did involved Redux at all. That was all pure JavaScript functions. None of it had anything to do with React. There's no React being imported anywhere here.
Don't we have to do the store thing too in the index? Did we do that?
That's where we're going right now.
Ah. I thought you was about to connect the functions or something like that.
Nope, we're going to index, which we're pretty much bare bones index here. So we need a couple of imports. I like to import them, in between the components. Yeah, I like to keep my imports in order. Whatever functionality I need, like React, Axios, and all that, I keep them at the top. Then my components below that. And then if I'm bringing in any CSS or styles, I keep them at the lowest level.
Okay, so now we're at
I don't think it matters. It makes it easier for me to read. So the first thing we're going to bring in is we're going to bring in the provider. The provider is basically does what it says it does. It provides state to the app via Redux. And it comes from React Redux. So now we have our provider. Now, in order for the provider to work, we have to create what they call a store. And the store is going to be what the reducer sends Redux as the state. That's going to be the store. That's what that the provider is going to distribute across the app as state. So we're going to import the create store. And that's going to come from Redux itself. That is not part of React Redux. That is just from straight up Redux. That's how it works for if you use this in Angular, Vue, or any other library that you would be working with Redux in. It's all of it's called create store. Now we do also know that we're going to be running multiple dispatch calls. So we need to find a way to, we are going to implement the thunk, but we have to put that thunk into Redux. And how that's done is through middleware, because that's what the thunk is. It's a version of middleware. So we have to bring in also from Redux the ability to apply the middleware. Oh, Miffle, that's awesome. Apply middleware, yes. So now we have those two. So now we have the ability to apply this middleware, and we have the ability to create a store. So let's start by, we're going to create the store. We'll just call it const store.
Did we already have React Redux as a dependency?
Yeah, we installed them.
Okay.
Did you not install them?
No, I need to do that later.
Okay, yeah, you want to install Redux and React Redux, both of these.
Okay.
Your package JSON should have the Redux thunk, Redux,
Gotcha.
and React Redux for what we're going to be using.
All right.
So we're going to make the store. What store is going to be the create store. We're going to create the store. And the store is going to take in our reducer, which we haven't imported yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the second parameter is going to be like without middleware, all you'd have to put in here is the reducer. But because we're using the thunk middleware, we got to bring in our apply middleware method.
And we are using middleware, so for asynchronous, or just we're using middleware just so we can snatch things, sort of?
We're using it to keep it asynchronous, and we're doing it through our Axios call.
Okay.
Our middleware is allowing us the ability to do this.
Okay.
Without middleware, we'd only be able to call that dispatch one time per function.
Gotcha.
So now we can run it asynchronous. So basically we could say we started loading, and when that's completed, okay, then we have our response. And when that's completed, it basically turns it into that that finite state machine that they talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is our finite state machine. We're running here, and it won't let it run any of these other two till this passes. When it hits here, we can't be in any of these other states. When it hits here, we can't be in any of these other states. And
And
this
we're
is our finite state machine.
improving the responsiveness of the app by creating this as an asynchronous function.
Correct. Yeah, you don't want your app to ever look dead. It's
Mhm.
basically what it is. And let's say you have an extended API call. If you do it the other way, even using ternary operators the other way, it'll still look dead. You'll click a button and it's like nothing happens for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this way we can use the dispatch and the raw JavaScript to trigger a component saying it's loading. So the user experience is, oh, I clicked a button and it's instantly loading. Okay, let me wait for this to come back, rather than looking at it thinking it's broken.
Right.
So, all right, so we have that. Where was I at? Index.js. Okay, so we created our store, which has our middleware of the thunk and our reducer. Well, there's a problem here. We haven't brought in our reducer yet or imported thunk. So let's start by, let's import our thunk. Is thunk destructured? Let me look. No, it's not. Okay, we're gonna bring in thunk, which is kind of a strange name, but I'll roll with it. We're gonna bring in thunk from, is it Redux thunk? Redux. Okay, so we have thunk. Now this is all of our like functionality. Now I like to break them up a little bit by just a single white space. Let's give me one more. Now we'll bring in like function imports, which is our reducer. We have to import the reducer. And that's coming from utils reducer. Okay, so now we have our reducer. Oh, look, our errors went away. Our app started rendering again. Check it out. So now we have everything imported. We have our middleware, we have our thunk that we need for the multiple dispatches, and we have our reducer function that we wrote, all brought in. And we created the store, and we have the provider set up. Now it's time to tie the provider into the app. So we're going to go up here, and we're going to call just like a component. It's provider. And the provider takes in a store as a prop, and we're going to have that equal to our store that we created. And what we do is we wrap app in that provider. So it works just real similar to how router works. You got it wrapped in app, so anything app and any of its children will have access to this Redux store. And always remember, like if you're using router and stuff as well as Redux, you want Redux to be the highest level. It would wrap your router as well.
Say that again, please.
If you were using like a React router in here,
Mm-hmm.
remember you want Redux at the highest level, the provider. So like let's say you know how you have to call like you import browser router as router in index, and you call router. Router would be inside of the provider.
Right.
It would not be on the outside.
Right.
So just remember to keep provider on the outside, then your routes, then app if you're going to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there, we're done in index, I believe. That brings us our thunk. We got all that. So let's start checking it out. Let's go into app. Where are we going to need this at? We're passing props into color get. Well, color get is where we're using it. So let's go into our color get function. This is where we're going to need access to that state. Well, look, we got use it. Well, we don't need any of this junk anymore. We're doing that through our reducer. So we're going to have props in here. I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to show you why. Because we are going to bring in Redux. So in order for that to happen, we need to bring in a program called connect. So we're going to import And that is a destructured from there. We're going to bring in connect. And that's going to come in from React Redux. All right, so we have connect. Now we have nothing going on here. We're just connecting. So the first thing we want to do is we have to, outside of our function here, we're going to write another function. It's going to be called map state to props. And its sole purpose is it takes that state that the reducer gives Redux and it turns it into props inside of this component and allows you to call like props.state. That's what it does. That function basically does exactly what it says. It maps state to props for the component. So we're going to call that function. It's going to be map state to props. All right, and what that's going to take in is state, and it's going to return that state. This looks a little redundant, but that's because it is at the moment. So here's the difference: is you see where we have this export function color get? We're going to get rid of that export. We're no longer exporting the color get function. What we are going to be exporting is we're going to be exporting the connect method that's going to run through it and dispatch color get. We'll basically send color get through it. So we have to call it as an export default. We're going to export default connect. This is where we're going to connect our app to the state and everything of Redux. So connect has its first method. The first thing it's going to take in is map state to props. Okay, so now it's taking in that map state to props function that brings in state, and it's going to return that state back out. The next one we're going to leave as an empty object now, just for now, because that's going to be where our dispatches come in. And then we have to chain this. This is similar to like formic and stuff we do. We're going to have another set of parentheses that's going to have color get in it. And this is our color get component right here. It's exactly what that is. So we're chaining that into connect. Now we have to remember one thing real quick. We have to go into app and we have to change our destructure to non-destructure for our import. And now we're back. So let's try something here. Let's go into color get. We're not doing anything else here, but let's just let's console log the props. So we are console logging props. So if Redux is connected at this point, we should be getting this as a prop, our initial state. And if you look down here, there it is. Now what we're getting is, if you notice, we're getting trigger. Oh, that's because I sent trigger up top. That shouldn't be there. But we'll deal with that in a minute. But if you look, I got the loading false. I have my colors as an empty array and an error. This trigger is because if you look in app, we're sending trigger. So that's why that one's there. But if you look at the rest of it, because that adds to the object when you add stuff like that, loading colors and errors. We're connected through Redux to our color get. We just bypassed app to get state into this component. No props passing, no nothing. We pulled it right out of Redux and brought it in here. Now we do know we need an action. We want to do something in here. We want to run that action through the reducer and to make our API call. So we need to bring in that action so we can use it. We're going to import, what do we call that thing? Colors. Yeah, it's just regular export. Where was I at? Import colors from We are in components. Let's go up a level to utils / actions. Okay, this will get our colors action. We want to run our colors action. So in here, it's just going to be an initial render of a get. And let me think of how I want to do this. Brought it in. So now we need to bring it in here. This is going to be our dispatch. So we're going to make colors. We're going to make that equivalent to colors. This is our dispatch object. So now if we look down here, when it re-rendered, we have a colors function as part of our state. The difference is this is the dispatch. Like when they taught me to do this, I actually wrote a const called map dispatch to props, and I would put this inside there. And that kind of made sense. So we're mapping the state to props. Now we're mapping our dispatch to props. Our dispatch is this colors method, or colors action. So we're bringing that in. Now we have it. So we can literally, here we can use a use effect. Let's use effect. Because we're back in React, might as well use effect. And in here, we're going to run props.colors. And in here, we'll have our empty array. Now, if we fire this off, do I have to call that? I think I got to invoke it. Let me see what happens. Let's run it. All right, props.colors. Loading, trigger, error, colors. Oh, do I have colors called twice? That would be not a good idea. And we're having an issue. Oh, I sure did. That was real bright. Well, let me fix that. You see where my problem is? You see how I have this labeled colors as an empty array in state? My action name is colors. So we're having a naming issue. So we're going to call this color action. Gotta watch out for them names. I was wondering why all of a sudden I wasn't getting it. So we have a color action. So let's go into colors get. We're going to bring in color action.
Color get.
And we're going to make color action. Make it a color action. We're fixing our errors. Invoke that, see what happens. Save it. All right. Got a color action. Oh, do you see what just happened?
Oh, now you're getting the data inside the array.
Exactly. That means our action worked. And if you know, you see how there's 3 of these right here?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why there's 3?
Because we have 3 cases.
You are close. We only have 2 cases at run, but that is why. Our first one is the initial render. Our initial render, that happens like rapidly before anything happens. So this is like our default state. You look at the trigger's false, loading's false, color's nothing, no error, color action function. Our next state that hits when this method's called, as that renders, is to run the reducer, our color action through the reducer, which our color action immediately dispatches a type of color start. Let's go to our reducer. What's color start do? It sets loading to true. Boom, there's our setting of loading to true. Just fire that dispatch off through thunk.
So
all right.
Our first trigger is our initial state.
Yep.
And then the next 2 triggers are the 2 cases that we set.
Yep. Our first case was true. It's bam. So we fire that off right away. And now the API is running. So if we go back to our action, we know the dot then, we're waiting on the get and the response. Well, our dot then responds color success and sets the payload by the response. So let's go in our reducer, see what that's doing. Okay, so it's setting it back to false and setting colors to payload. So we know we ran this case and this case. We're not going to run this case unless something goes wrong. So we ran this case. Okay, so loading went back to false. Our colors is populated.
Mm-hmm.
So now if we look in here, we should have our colors array from the API. And just like that, that was Redux. Y'all look thrilled.
Now, I'm excited. It's thinking face. Of course, you can't see my screen, but and the reason why it's only doing 2 of the cases because it's either success or fail in addition to the start.
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So if you look at our action, whenever we run like one of these API calls with the get and the dot then, when it's finished, this function's done. If dot then doesn't run, then it runs the catch. So it either runs one of these or the other one.
Cool.
It never runs both. So it's waiting for the response. If it doesn't respond, it runs the catch error. And that at that point sets our fail. Like, I wonder if I can make it fail. Let me see if I can do it. Let's save this, see if it fails and see if we see it. We just failed. Let's see here. Haha, look at there it is. You know, there's one other problem that way we got to change. Do you notice it?
So
basically, our initial render, here's where we set loading true. Boom, it failed. And here is our case for the fail. Loading still set to true. So we have to go into our reducer and fix that. But colors is 0, and all of a sudden, look, error is, it's populated with the error message. Request failed with status code 404 at create error, localhost, so on and so forth.
So we're going to add loading : false.
What just happened? My computer is acting crazy.
Did you do an update?
No, I let my wife use it.
That explains it.
Not going to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got to use this thing called like TeamViewer for work, and it seems like every time that happens, I have issues like this for a little bit.
Yeah, it probably doesn't. Zoom fights with it, probably.
Yeah, it just doesn't like it. I think and it's only with Zoom. It like collides with Zoom. It makes it do weird things.
Oh, I'm sure that's not an accident.
Yeah. Let's bring this back up to where we were. Let's go into our, let's see, utilities, our reducer. Yeah, here's where we're at. If you look, we're spreading out state. We have our error to action payload. So let's go ahead and fix that to where we have our loading. We're going to set our loading back to false. At the comma.
What did you do to even cause that error in the first place?
I changed the API endpoint. Okay, it's not liking this. Why is it not liking this? What am I missing? What am I missing?
Mine is working.
What does the problem say? Like if you go to the terminal thing?
Expected a comma.
It has a comma though.
No, it's got a period.
No, above that.
Comma.
No, I'm saying above that. It has a comma.
Huh.
And there's nothing under it, so it's like, why would it need a comma there?
Oh, mine doesn't like case custom.
I still don't like it here. What's going on? I don't know. I got to restart this thing anyway.
Oh, there's one.
Oh, I got to refire this one up too. It's not going to pick anything up.
That's a really cute background photo, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It's my little one in Kentucky.
Aw, that's very sweet.
That was about 2 years ago too. He's grown another foot since then.
How old is he?
He's 8.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they grow super fast. Between like 8 and 10, it's insane.
Well, he's gonna be a big boy. He was in the 90th. He's been in like between the 90th to the 99th percentile in height since he was born.
Wow.
Yeah, like
tall?
right now he's the tallest third grader in his class by a good 4 inches,
Aw.
and I think he's getting ready to sprout again because he's starting to eat me out of house and home again.
Oh yeah, that's how you know.
React effect hook is missing a dependency. API is defined but never used in colorget.js. What happened? Oh, it didn't save any of that, did it? Oh wait, no, it's there. We're just not using it. And I'm not erroring. I'm gonna go look at the console. 404 not found. Loading still true. I don't know why that's not liking that. That's like weird. I don't know, I'll just keep typing it. It's probably just my junk acting up. Let's see here. Loading. And I refresh. Okay, it works. It just, that's wrong. So yeah, now we triggered the error. It went back to loading false. Everything worked. So let's go back into our action. Let's set this back to where it's supposed to be. And we're all better. All right, that was Redux in a nutshell. Any questions?
No, that was good. That was great.
Like the only other thing I could think of we could put in there is if you guys want to look at the logger.
The logger and the button, the log out button, if we have time.
Yeah, I could show you a log out button. That'll only take a minute.
That'll be cool.
Let's
Anybody
go
else?
to the login screen.
Can you see the screen, by the way?
Yeah, I can't see your viz code.
Oh yeah, it's doing that again too. How about now?
Now I can see it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's make another button. We're going to put this button outside of the form tag. This is going to be our log out button.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because none of this is going to be performed by the form function. What's it saying? Oh, that's right. I got my form as a div. All right, let me, you know what? I bet I could put it in there. So it says log in, log out. And here, let's write the function that we're going to use. We're going to make a const of, we'll call it log out. And we're going to make that a fat arrow function. It's going to take in an event because all buttons refresh by default. So e dot prevent default. Oh, prevent default. Yeah. All right, and then basically this is like the easiest thing in the world to do because what we're going to do is we're going to local storage dot set item. The set item of token, which is our token that we set to the, we set that when we got our callback. We're going to set that to an empty string. So now we're going to tie that into our button. OnClick equals, I called that log out, I believe. So let's see, I called it log out and that token there. So if we go back into our application, you see our token right there?
Missing.
This should work.
Constant log out
Gone.
equals.
Set item. So why'd you do token in the string and then comma empty string?
That's how set item works. Its first parameter is the key, and the second parameter is the value.
Ah, okay.
So we already we're setting our token to a value called token when we run our login. So like we run the Lambda school 1, 2, 3, 4. We log in. See how it's called token and it's set to this value.
Yeah.
Well, this value is our authorization. So in order for us to log out, we have to erase that value. And I don't believe there's any way in JavaScript to just call clear local storage. That's not gonna. It's not gonna let you do that. You have to erase the value by the name. So when we want to log out, we're basically saying find the value of the key of token and clear its value to empty, to null, empty string. So when you click log out, it just clears it to that empty string.
Can you scroll down so I can see the button?
Sure.
Okay, it's on click. So why is this one an on click, whereas the first button is not an on click?
Because it's got a type of submit, which ties it into the form.
Okay.
By on submit. And if you have all buttons inside of this form tag, will tie into the form unless you tell them otherwise. So like right now, I'm running an on click log out. And if you look up here, I'm preventing the default of that button. And I'm just running specifically one function with it that does not involve the form at all. And that's the log out.
Cool.
And then you can have redirects and stuff. Like if you want to redirect them back to the home page with router at that point, you could on the log out, so on and so forth. But that's the main functionality of the log out. What it does is it just clears that local storage out for the token.
Cool. And what is the logger?
The logger, I got to pull that up. I got to pull up my project. The logger shows you the state values.
Okay.
In the console as every time state changes, it'll log the state values.
Wow.
So like right now we're kind of logging it this way. Logger is actually a pretty cool diagnostic tool for Redux. I got to remember how to bring it in though. Let me get to my components here. Which one was that? I have it in the front end. Where's index? Yeah, I just brought in Thunk, so that would be the React Redux app. I'm one of those guys. I always got to go back to my old projects to get what I need. So, okay, so first thing we're going to have to do here, let's get to this terminal. Let's add a new one. We're going to have to yarn add Redux logger. Okay, they moved that meeting up. Cool. 6 o'clock, I got a meeting for hackathon with everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Okay, so logger's in. So let's go into our index.js. We're going to import it. Logger from Redux logger. And then the logger you always want at the end of your apply middleware, because you want all the other middleware to run first. Whether you have thunk or something else, it's going to chain them down that way. So you want to add that to the end. So now we should have logger. Did you see what just happened there? Well, we're forbidden because let me log in so we could see it in action. 1, 2, 3, 4. Log in. Did I get my local storage? I did. Let's refresh. And console. That's what logger does. All them pretty colors.
Mm-hmm.
Basically shows you action color start ran at this timestamp. The previous state was this. The action was that type. The next state set loading to true. So you get the before and after change of state. And then all of a sudden the API comes back. Success, that's the action run. The previous state was this. Then I had this action type and the payload. And the new state was setting the loading back to false and setting colors to that array. So it tells you exactly what's going on as it's doing it.
Nice.
So that's logger.
That was quick. Everything else that we've done.
What's that now?
I said after everything else that we've done, those were quick.
Yeah, they're not bad. Redux, once you start playing with it, I think you tend to get better with it. I know I do. I didn't like it at first. I still don't like it. I ain't gonna lie, but it has its place. Like truthfully, API calls, there is nothing that handles it better. As far as just using thunk and keeping it asynchronous. So anytime I make an API call, I run it like this with an action in Redux. And I set that user information to state just this way. Just that asynchronous, the way asynchronous API calls work, it keeps the user experience a lot better than having to watch the screen flash or do different things. But as far as like regular state values, like let's say you had just a GET request, that's all you needed to make, and you had that state and you wanted to pass it down 7 levels deep in the app, it's so much easier just to use context to get it there.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Or Redux, I think it has its place for, the reducer and the actions when you're going to be manipulating global state. Redux is where it's at. Now, granted, context has the way to manipulate global state, but context also changes the initial state where Redux keeps it intact. So context works just like use effect, or I mean use state would, as if you pass it through prop 7 levels deep. Context is the same thing. It's just that it's skipping you from typing in props, and then state equals state and props, and the state equals props.state, and passing all through. Context just eliminates you having to do that. So, but yeah, and you get these cool tools like this with the logger that makes fancy colors in your console. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that's why I like using the rainbow and the rainbow indents and the rainbow brackets. So helpful.
So, but yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
You guys want to go over anything else? Anything else holding you up possibly? How's build week going for everybody?
Going good for me. I'm working on like a rating thing that I can highlight the stars. Like when you rate something is like 1 through 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think there's a project that I'm not mistaken that Christina did with 3 stars though, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm probably gonna go look into that, see how she did that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Do you want to click on the stars, like just have like 5 empty stars there, and click on 3 of them, and 3 turn yellow?
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's exactly what
Okay. Trying to think of where you might look, what project you might look for that.
Yeah. My only issue is like how to make the stars render. So I'm guessing like I will have to look for like a, what do you call those? A library that has like stars.
Yeah, you can find that in
you can just do
Font Awesome has them.
Or the noun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to have to put them in an array of some kind.
Yeah.
And have it color them in by index, because you don't want to be clicking on each individual star. But like if you click on the 4th star, you want the other 3 to populate.
Yeah. And I forgot the what do you call it? Those mouse events, like when you hover over, that like it'll highlight or something like that.
Yeah, mouse over.
Also, Hector, your UX design should have those icons for you already.
I don't have one.
No, you don't have a designer, but you have a file.
I don't have no file. Wait, there's no UX. I don't have that.
No, every single, I literally, physically. So what we did is, this is something that I don't think it was explained very well during the kickoff.
Oh, it wasn't explained hardly at all.
And I kept saying, you gotta explain this, gotta explain this. Every single product, because I just got pinged while we were doing this, and actually I'm gonna stop recording because I don't want this on the recording.